everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for Understanding Student Loans. This is Sarah Reemsma with the Royal Neighbors Foundation. As many of you know, the Royal Neighbors Foundation is a 501c3 public charity dedicated to building women's futures through financial education. We are proud to partner with certified financial planner Lauren Lyons-Cole to provide women across the country information and resources to help them become more financially secure. These resources, including webinars like this one, are provided free of charge thanks to many generous donors who believe in our mission of empowering women financially. So I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to get a better understanding about student loans, and whether you're ready to head to college, recently graduating, or a parent or grandparent simply wanting to help. If you've missed any of our previous webinars, this is our third. And if you missed any of them, you can go to our website at royalneighborsfoundation.org and to view the pre-recorded webinars. But if this is your first time joining us, I would like to quickly point out the chat box at the left and would like you to type in your questions if you have any, and I will be facilitating and answering those questions, and Lauren will address them. We'll also have a few polls that we would like to do to keep things fun, and we just want to do a test here to see if it's working. And if there's multiple people in your group, we'd like to know that with this first poll question. And don't get a consensus if there's a bunch of you. Just go ahead and click the person that's handling the votes. And is it just you? 2 or 3? 4 to 5, 5 to 10, or over 10. Looks like we've got a lot of people solo tonight. We're happy to have you. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Lauren Lyons-Cole. She is a certified financial planner and has helped thousands of people change the way they think about money by getting organized, spending smarter, and earning more. She's been a frequent guest on the Today Show, CBS This Morning, and Fox and Friends. So help me welcome certified financial planner, Lauren Lyons-Cole.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Sarah, for that great introduction, for getting us all situated with how the polling works for tonight. I'm so glad that all of you are joining us, and hopefully everyone's having an okay time seeing the pictures. If you have any technical difficulties, please send us a little message and we'll try to get that worked out. But like Sarah said, my name is Lauren Lyons-Cole. I am a certified financial planner, and I do a lot of education. So I'm very happy to partner with Royal Neighbors Foundation, focusing on women. And student loans are a topic that I think it's so important. It's very important to me, and I think it's very important for our country, and clearly it's important for all of you who are giving up time tonight to talk about this. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about student loans. I'm going to try to provide information whether or not you are a parent, if you are a high school student, a college student, or a recent college graduate. Whatever stage of the process you might be in, we're going to talk about that tonight. And please, by all means, if you have questions, send them to us as we go, because we will try to address those at the end. And anything we don't get to, we can always do over email later. So student loan debt, it really is this big, huge topic. And this graph right here, I really like. It shows that student loans, for the first time in the past few years, have actually surpassed other types of debt. That includes auto loans, credit cards, home equity loans. What it doesn't include are mortgages. We still have a greater outstanding amount of mortgages than we do student loans, which is a good thing. And arguably, you could look at this and say, okay, you know, college is expensive, and that's not ideal, but I'm glad to see that we're spending more money on college than we are spending on cars. So that's the positive spin to look at this, or on credit cards, you know. So even though college is expensive, there is value to it. There is a value to a college degree. And just to point out the statistics here, outstanding student loan balances have increased over $1 trillion, and about 11.5% of those student loan balances are delinquent or in default, which just means that whoever has those loans is not able to pay them. So for the rest of the student loans that are outstanding, people are getting by. Now, like I said, there is value in college. There's a better value than buying a car, right? So in 2014, the average student loan debt was about $33,000 for graduating seniors. So that's a lot of money. But if you look at that's the graph on the left side. If you look at the graph on the right side, if you earn a 4-year degree, you actually make almost double, 98% more per hour than those people who do not go to college. So even though we're paying a lot for college, at least there is some value that we're getting out of college. Now, if you're going to take on student loans, of course, one thing you really want to do is think about what does that value mean for you specifically. So if you're a high school student and or you're a parent of a high school student, which I know we have plenty of you with us tonight, if you're starting to think about going to college, it's not just about what town do you want to be in, what football team do you like. It's almost not even about what do you want to study. You really have to take the long-term perspective of what is your future career. And that's hard to think about when you're 17 or 18 or even 16. It's hard for a parent, I think, to coach your children through this, especially if they don't really know. And so they don't have to have all the answers, but it is important to start thinking about, when you're 30, when you're 40, when you're 50, what kind of work do you expect to be doing? And those sorts of questions are really important as we begin to decide which college to go to and how much money we're going to borrow to pay for that college. Let's break down this $33,000 in student loan debt, just to think about it for a second. So $33,000, that's the average amount. It actually ends up being a monthly payment of just under $350. So you can see it here, it's $344.56. And over the course of 10 years, if you pay the student loan debt off in a normal amount of time, which is 10 years, you will pay $8,347 in interest. The loan principal, of course, is $33,000. That ends up being a total bill of $41,347 for college over a 10-year period. Now, real quickly, I just want to throw up another poll as we're going through this and find out how many of you have student loans or expect to have student loans, or if you're a parent with a child. So we'll throw up the first poll question here, and if you could just answer it so we have a sense of what we're really going to focus on tonight as we keep going through these. So parents whose kids have student loans, graduates with student loans. Okay, it's kind of diverse, the amount of people, the concerns for people who are on tonight with us. So it's like evenly divided. All right, very good. Thank you for voting. And then I also want to ask this another follow-up poll question to that. So we'll throw up another one, which is, how do you feel about those student loans that you either already have or the student loans that you expect that you're going to have to take out in the future, or your children? So I'm just going to throw that up real quickly if you don't mind voting on this one as well. Do you feel stressed about these student loans? Do you feel confused, frustrated, neutral? Do you feel in control? Whatever feeling word there suits you the closest to how you feel. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect, but I see a lot of people saying that they feel stressed and or confused. And I think that's a really typical feeling with student loans. Thank you for voting on that. So I've worked with a lot of 20-something, 30-something-year-old people as a certified financial planner in New York, and sometimes those sessions have been because there were parents who contacted me because they wanted their children to get their student loans in order. So I definitely understand on both sides how stressful student loans can be, and also how confusing, because there's so many different options, and how do you figure out which payment plan is best for you? So the one thing I really want everyone to come away from tonight with is knowing that student loans, like I said at the beginning, it's a lot better to spend $33,000 on a college education than it is to spend it on a new SUV. So it is stressful. I definitely understand that. It's stressful when you're just starting out of school and you're not making much money and you're trying to balance student loan debt. But if there's one thing I can say, please try to to understand that it's not as bad as you think it is. Trust me, I've seen people with really, really bad student loan situations, and generally those are people who have gone on for years to graduate school, right? People who are pursuing PhDs or doctors or lawyers, people who have really spent a lot of time in school. But if we're just talking about undergrad student loans, which is what we're talking about with this $33,000, it's not that uncommon, and it is manageable. So just from the point of stress, if you can take a deep breath and just know you're not alone, and you can come up with a plan and you just deal with it. And the good thing is you will, like we said here, you're making a lot more money than if you didn't have the student loans. So here's an interesting thing, just thinking about if you take out $33,000 in student loans when you're in college. This is the thing that I think a lot of us don't think about. This is what I was alluding to before. It's so important to have a long-term plan. It's not just about going to college. College, for those of us who have been there, can think back on, you learn a lot, you study a lot, you work really hard when you're in college, but there's also a lot of important life experiences that you have there. And all of those things are choices that you can make. You don't necessarily need to take out a bunch of loans, especially if you're not sure what you want to do with the rest of your life. So these are some starting salaries based on different majors and different job directions that a graduating senior might decide to take. These are for 2014, so it's kind of interesting. A lot of people, when they go to college, want to major in English or psychology, sort of the more interesting, fun type majors. But those in the humanities and social sciences, that average salary is only about $38,000 coming out of school. And that's about as much as the average student loan debt. And that's tough. That makes paying your debt and being able to save for retirement and afford an apartment and buy a car, for that matter, really hard. So not to discourage people from going down that path, but if majoring in English or psychology is very important to you, you want to keep in mind that the amount of student loans you decide to take out really need to be managed. They need to be fewer than someone who decides to major in computer science or engineering. Those people can afford to pay greater loan balances when they get out and get their first paycheck. So this is an important exercise for everyone who's thinking about going to college to think through. Now, a common rule of thumb, you might have heard this before, is that you should take out only as many student loans as you expect your first year starting salary to be coming out of school. That gets repeated a lot in the media. So in that case, we could say that someone who's majoring in English could, in theory, take out up to $38,000 in student loans. I would challenge you to go one step further and not take out as much as your first year starting salary, but aim to take out half. So that means that someone who's going to major in engineering or computer science could afford to do $33,000 in student loan debt. Meanwhile, someone majoring in English or psychology, I'd encourage them to keep their student loan balance to under $20,000. That may or may not be possible. The thing to consider is, how are you going to do that? And this is the big question. Before you go to school, how can you make sure you don't take out too many student loans? After you go to school, how can you make sure you're paying them down in the way that it makes most financial sense for your situation? Now, quickly, just to walk through this, and if there are any parents on tonight, if your kids are open to talking about money, studies have actually shown that the children who learn the most about money are not the ones who come from wealthy households, they're not the ones who come from parents who are necessarily financially responsible. The key to having financially responsible children is to talk about money. So if you feel equipped to have those conversations, have them. It is so important. And a lot of parents are more likely to talk about some of the other uncomfortable topics like drugs or sex than to talk about money. So money is a hard thing, but it's so important that we talk about it with our children, especially when they're getting ready to start their adult life and go off and find their way in the world on their own. So consider talking about money with them, and this is a great starting point, I think. You can use this exact slide. We can send these out to everyone after the fact. But if we go back to this previous slide, out of all the different majors out there, the average salary coming out for students is around $48,700. So, That's a big ballpark number, but that's a good average to sort of work off of if you're going to talk to your kids about what kind of lifestyle they can expect when they graduate from college, which might seem very far away to them, but if they can think about it in this way, it'll help them, first of all, while they're managing their expenses in college, but also help them to minimize the amount of student loans they're taking out. So $48,700, depending on where you live, is about $3,000 after taxes. So that's a paycheck every other week of about $1,500, give or take a little bit, right? The median rent, so the most common rent price in the United States, is $884. Again, depends a lot on where you live. You might be able to get an apartment for cheaper. It might cost more. There's always solutions like having a roommate or getting a smaller apartment or moving back home, which lots of millennials are doing now. And it's not always because they have to. Sometimes it's because they're saving up to buy their own house one day. So living at home is, if that's an arrangement that works for everyone, is not a terrible option. So $3,000 after taxes, subtracting out a little under $900 for rent, $884. Roth IRA contribution, which I would want all 22-year-olds who have just graduated from college to be contributing to a Roth IRA. So I've worked that into the monthly budget. That $458 a month will get you up to the $5,500 maximum contribution for 2014. That number could be higher in 2015. Student loan payment of $345, which is based on that average student loan balance of $33,000. Transportation, that's based on national averages for gas prices. So I'm assuming there that your child or you already own a car and that you're just paying for insurance and gas. So that number, again, give or take, $200. Then most people will have their cell phone, the cable, the internet, some sort of other fixed expenses. Maybe it's a gym membership, some other recurring monthly expenses there that are about $200 a month. Then food and dining. For the average spending for people in their 20s on food and dining on a weekly basis is about $175. It's higher than for any other decade. So, that might be because they're going out to dinner with their friends, maybe they're buying drinks while they're out, but definitely people in their 20s, so recent college graduates, are spending the most on food and dining. And that's the average nationwide, no matter where you live, $700. I've certainly seen people in their 20s who spend $1,200 a month on food and dining, and that's a lot of money. When you subtract all of these expenses out of that average take-home pay once you graduate from college, it doesn't leave much left over. $263 a month. I mean, that would be for shopping, for travel, saving up for an emergency fund, any sort of emergencies that do come up, like if you need to get the air conditioning fixed in your car. This, you can see when you start to break it down like this, even though these are just averages and we're just sort of estimating here, the recent college graduate is not making much money. And for any of us who are older, we can remember those days. I think my first job out of college, I was a teacher. And so I think I made $38,000. So, right, in that humanities, social sciences kind of price range. And I did live at home for the first year when I graduated from college, and that allowed me to save money and to be able to afford a lifestyle on that $38,000 salary. And I only did it for a year, but it was a good learning experience. And I think that a lot of graduating seniors, it's an adjustment to suddenly understand, oh, yay, I have a paycheck, and oh, wait, I have bills too. Much less exciting. So if you can talk about these things before they actually start to happen, then it can influence some of our decisions that we're making while we're in college, including credit. We're not even talking about credit cards tonight, but a lot of college students end up getting suckered into taking out a credit card, and they don't understand how credit cards work, and then they're shopping or they're buying their friends drinks once they're 21. People end up spending money that they don't have because they don't understand. So this sort of exercise is very, very helpful. I've done this with a lot of college students who are interns, and it's always eye-opening to them. Like, oh, this is how it works when I have to pay my own bills. So go through this with your kids, or if you're a recent college graduate or if you're in college yourself, try to run some of these numbers and just sort of see. I mean, if you want to find out how much rent is in your hometown, go online and look, look on Craigslist or wherever people find apartments where you live and see, what kind of place could you afford? What kind of place would you want to live in? How much does that cost? Have these sorts of conversations with yourself. And keep in mind that if this $3,000 didn't have the student loan payment of $345, there'd be a lot more money on a monthly basis. So the student loan payment, when you start to look at it like this, you can definitely understand how people are struggling to keep up with their payments because life is expensive. One other thing I will add right here, just as an aside, it's also really important for your first job to try to negotiate. So whenever you are getting your first job, make sure that you don't accept the first salary offer because usually it's a price range. And if you can just get them to give you a little tiny bit more, again, it helps out that leftover bottom line there so that you can hit all of your other savings goals and not feel stressed from week to week with your bills. So I'd like to think about it from this perspective so that it's not just showing up at the financial aid office and, taking what they give you and spending all of it or not understanding how the student loans connect to your future job opportunities. These are really important connections to start to make. Okay, so now I want to move on and talk about actually paying for college. We're going to talk about before, during, and after school. How do student loans play into this concept of getting ourselves a college education? Before I go into that, I want to throw up one more poll question. And I want to understand for everyone who's listening what your biggest concern is when it comes to paying for college or paying off your student loans, depending on which side of this coin that you're on, right? So when we're thinking about college, let's see, there we go. So you're thinking about college, student loans come into play sometimes just simply because you can't afford the school that you want to go to. Or it could be that you don't understand financial aid or how student loans work. So maybe that's a concern. Not knowing what you want to major in or what sort of paycheck that might equate to one day is a concern. Not being able to afford those payments. And then also not having a clear plan to pay down the loans over time. So it looks like affordability, it's a lot about affordability because money is tight. I totally get that. And that is a huge problem for many people. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for voting. I'm going to stop it there. So we'll talk about affordability here for sure. And it is tough. College is super expensive. I'm sure everyone knows that the expenses for college have increased greater than the rate of inflation. So we're paying so much more for a college degree now compared to 10 years ago than we are if you compare a loaf of bread. So a loaf of bread 10 years ago was relatively cheaper than a credit at the college that you might want to attend. So, okay, for those of you who have already graduated, just hang with me here for a second because I want to talk to the parents and to the high school students or parents of high school students who are listening tonight. And then we'll get to all of you graduates in a second. So before going to college, there's so many strategies you can do. And I know that it's a huge topic because you've got to manage the extracurriculars your kid's doing in high school. You've got to manage their grades. You've got to manage any sort of financial strategies that you're trying to take into consideration before applying for financial aid. This is definitely something that you can think about and try to work on before you get too far into your junior year. I would almost say sophomore year for people who are very just go-getters and wanting to work on that ahead of time. But junior year is when you really want to start thinking about this. And of course, senior year is when you actually start applying to colleges and applying for financial aid. So for the parents of the high school students, start talking to them about what their strengths are. And this is kind of a funny story. So when I was in high school, I was always really good at math, which makes sense because I do financial planning. And at that time, I'm like 16 years old, and my dad told me, he was like, you should major in finance or engineering or some sort of math-related major because it's not very many people go into the math and science field, and you're good at math, so you should do that. You will make the most money. And I was like, ha, 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 Dad, that's a great idea. Anyway, here's what I'm going to major in. And I wanted to work with, various nonprofit type environments. I actually did Teach for America right out of college, and that was what I wanted to do. So I didn't listen to him. My dad tried very hard. And he was right. Ultimately, I ended up going back to school so that I could become a financial planner 5 years after I had graduated from college in the first place. So if I had just followed his advice in the first place, I might have started on this career path a little bit sooner. But so kids, if you're listening, your parents know you. You should probably pay attention to them. But if you can help work with your, but even though I didn't major in finance or engineering like my dad told me I should, he got into my head that I'm good at math. Okay, I am good at math. And that helped to influence my long-term career strategy because he knew that about me. And I was young. How am I supposed to know I knew I liked math. I didn't know that that made me different from other people. So work with your kids to help them identify what their strengths are, what special things they might bring to the world. And you know what? If they're a great teacher, if they're really good with kids, just because teachers make less money is not a reason to discourage them, of course, from that path. But we can be realistic and say, look, if you know you want to teach kindergarten, that's such an admirable career path. In theory, you'll have really good retirement benefits. There's a lot of positives to that career path, but we need to be realistic about how many student loans we're taking out. Or if you have a kid who knows they want to be an engineer or knows that they want to, work at a bank or something, you can maybe take some bigger risks with the student loans. But talk through those things ahead of time so that it's not just, I'm going to college, yay! There's got to be a strategy behind it as well. And you can work through some of those budgeting tools. You can actually use, there's some really cool technology apps online, or if your kids have smartphones, or if you have a smartphone that you can use to practice budgeting with your children. One that I really like is called levelmoney.com, like level like you would use to hang a picture, levelmoney.com. And of course there's mint.com as well. And we've got resources at the end of this that we'll send out to all of you, so don't worry about trying to write that down. But those are tools you can use to help work with your kids so that they can start learning about budgeting long before they actually have to do it. That way they can practice without having to learn lessons the hard way, hopefully. You might as well talk to your kids too, not just about their strengths and what career might be good for them, but also what sort of lifestyle they might want to live. So if they want to move to a big city, you can look online with them to help them understand how much it costs, to pay for an apartment in a big city compared to the town where you live in. Because there's huge differences, obviously, in how much it costs to live. You can talk about what kind of cars they might want to drive, how much that costs on a monthly basis. Again, parents who talk to their kids about money have the most financially educated kids. It is so important. And it's a fun game. It's fun. Go online shopping with your kids. It's like window shopping. And this can help influence the decisions that they're making when they're going to college. So make a list of the colleges they might be interested in attending. This is another thing that my dad helped me do. We went through, and in fact, there is a great tool. It's in our resources, but it's a quiz you can take to try to identify what type of school would be best for you. So different kids obviously are going to do better at different types of schools. Some, like my younger sister, went to a very small liberal arts college, and that worked well for her. I went to a big, massive state school, and that worked well for me. So it's important to understand the differences in your children and to set them up for success. So using an online tool to figure out what school might be best, and then looking at the budget, how much does that school cost? If it's a very expensive school and you really think that it would be worth it for your child to go there, then I would encourage you to think about letting them do a year or maybe 2 years at the community college in your town. Let them get all those general education classes out of the way. No one knows. Ultimately, when you graduate from a four-year school, that's what goes on your resume. It doesn't matter where you took, freshman math or freshman English. So if that's a trade-off that you need to make so that you can afford the more expensive schools for the actual classes related to their major, then do that. There's not one path. A lot of people think there's one way to make college work, but there's so many different strategies that you can use. The other thing that a lot of people overlook are scholarships. A lot of times I think we think scholarships are too intimidating, you won't get any, it's not worth it to even waste your time applying. But the thing is, there's so many scholarships that go unused every year. And here's something you can tell your kids. You can tell them I said this. I'll tell you a personal story. I actually left college with extra money in my bank account because I applied for so many scholarships. I started when I was in high school, and every year I applied for scholarships. And if you break it down, if you spend 20 hours each year applying for scholarships, which is a lot of time. It probably wouldn't even take 20 hours, but let's say you spend an hour per scholarship. So 20 scholarships, 20 hours. If you get one scholarship that's $1,000. That is a $50 hourly rate. And there is nothing you can do when you're 18 years old that will pay you $50 an hour. So applying for scholarships is such a good use of your children's time. And it's a great way to balance that whole, should I work during college? Should I not? You know, if you take one weekend and apply to a ton of scholarships, that may very well be enough money to supplement all your other sources for paying for college. So definitely encourage your kids to do that. You can use fastweb.com, which is an online source for applying for scholarships, or just once they're in school, have them go to their department chair and say, what can I do to apply for scholarships? Or go to the dean of the college. What can I do to apply for scholarships? Go to the financial aid office. What can I do to apply for scholarships? Don't be afraid to keep asking. And if they're involved in extracurricular activities, same thing. Those services often offer scholarships. And of course, the Royal Neighbors has a fantastic scholarship program. So everyone who's listening tonight should definitely apply for that. So you want to look for those things in your area. Finaid.org, FINAID.org is a really good resource if you haven't found it yet. It's sort of the go-to web center for all things student loans, before, after, during college. So they have great tools. They're the place that actually has the tool to find out which type of college is best for you, which we have the link at the end of this. And they've got a calculator to estimate your expected family contribution, which is an important part of the financial aid process. And they've also got some estimates where you can figure out how much financial aid you can expect to get through the FAFSA form that you'll have to apply for. So, and that you'll want to do January of your senior year. Chances are your guidance counselors at the school are already prepping your kids to do this, and hopefully you're going and learning about this process as well. But I would also encourage you all to go to finaid.org and just read through the content there, because they have great strategies like, if your kid is a sophomore right now or junior, what can you be doing to set yourself up to get the most financial aid so that you understand the process, so that your kid can really maximize the amount of resources that they have available to them. So those are all things you want to do before going to college. And you'll notice I'm really focusing a lot on thinking about some less financial things like what type of career would they want? What are their strengths? How will they approach budgeting? Because those are things that are often overlooked. Again, because we're focused on which football team do we like, or where do we want to go to? We want to study English or whatever. So try to put those conversations aside, or at least have them in conjunction with these bigger life stage sort of questions. Now, in college, it's very important to continue to evaluate what you're majoring in. So it's possible that what you started out enjoying is something that you're going to change your mind about. And I think there's a lot of pressure on students not to change your mind, because you don't want to look you're irresponsible, or that you don't have it all figured out yet. But it's okay to change your major, especially if you think it's going to set you up for a career path that you'll prefer in the long run. In fact, 20% of students change majors to something that is more marketable. So if you went in majoring in English and now you think, actually, maybe I'll do computer science, that would be a very big change. But if that's something that you realize that you're really interested in, don't be afraid to switch. If it takes you an extra year of college, go to summer school, whatever you have to do, you're already there. So you might as well make that change now before you have to go back to school later, and then it might be more expensive and also damaging to your career path. Also, while you're in college, it's very important to try out your future job. I actually just got an email yesterday, I think it was yesterday, from a girl who is studying at the University of Georgia, and she's studying financial planning. And she very wisely emailed me. She found my website and decided that, she wants to be a financial planner. She decided to email me out of the blue and ask if I was going to hire an intern for 2015. And I don't know yet, but she's the first one to ask. So now I have her resume, and she took the initiative, and I really respect that. And she's going to be in New York in November. She's a junior in college, and I'm going to meet with her for coffee. So if you're in college, or if you're a parent who has kids in college, encourage them to do what that girl did. Find someone who's doing what you think you want to do and become their friend. There is no better way to find out how much money you can expect to make, to maybe get a job, to find out if you even like the work, in practice. People who are already doing, any of us grown-ups watching, it's really fun to be able to invest in younger people who are choosing a career path. So don't be afraid to reach out and find out as much as you can from someone who's working in your field. And if you go and shadow them, or if you meet with that person, and if you realize, actually, that is not a good career path for me, again, don't be afraid to change. The other thing, so while you're doing that, while you're testing out your job, while you're trying to get internships or volunteering or just having coffee with an expert in your field, begin building your professional network. So if you're in college or even if you're a recent graduate, obviously LinkedIn is very important. Monitoring your social networks is very important. These are all things that you need to be thinking about constantly, because not so much that it applies directly to your student loan payments, but what it does apply to is your overall earning potential and your career path. And the student loans will pass, right? After 10 years, or maybe a little bit longer, depending on how many loans you have, but after 10 years, they're going to go away. But we're going to work for like 50 years, potentially, is the rate that retirement is going and all of that. So our career path is so much longer and more important than these student loan payments. So if you get too focused and too stressed out on the student loan payments, you're going to miss the bigger picture, which is that you're setting yourself up for a long-term career. You're starting to think about, what kind of lifestyle do you want? How are you going to be earning money? How much money are you going to be earning? So getting too focused on the details of actually paying off your loans can be a detractor. And when you're in your 20s, when you're recently graduating, or when you're still in college, it's so important to really use all of your energy and your enthusiasm to try new things, to get out there, to take risks, and to take a job, to move jobs, to change majors, to be nimble in those things, because as you get older, you get more responsibility. And at that point, you're pretty much done with your student loans, and you're kind of locked in on something. Not that you're locked in, but you're definitely on a path, and so you want to maximize that path by making good choices during college and after college as well. Now, some record-keeping things you need to do. Of course, continue to file the FAFSA every year. Keep good communication between the college student and the college student's parents. The two of you need to talk really clearly, because the financial aid you qualify for can change drastically from year to year, depending on financial decisions you've made. Again, finaid.org they have tons of good resources on how to manage that, how much money you are qualifying for during each year of college. So do your reading at that website. Continue to file with FAFSA every year. Keep applying for scholarships every single year. I literally got scholarships starting in high school and then all 4 years of college. It's completely possible. I got them from all sorts of random places. I think I studied ancient Greek at one point, and I got a $500 scholarship from the ancient Greek department. Really anywhere that you can find scholarships, you should be applying for them. The other thing that I sort of already mentioned is to follow a strict budget. So if you're a parent or if you're a college kid, trying to figure out how to live on a strict budget now is so beneficial for so many reasons. First of all, it can help you minimize the amount of student loans you take out. Really, really important. But also it's going to teach you how to live by a budget, so that when you are on your own with your own paycheck, you'll already know what to do. You'll be so far ahead of everybody else if you can start practicing now while you're in college. So levelmoney.com, there's that link again, mint.com. And know that actually studies have shown that 67% of students cut fun spending to help keep their college costs in check. But it's impossible to know how much you're spending on all these fun things in college, like, spring break or whatever, if you're not keeping track of it. So whatever money you are spending, you should be tracking and monitoring on a monthly basis. I really believe that if you start like freshman year of school, or as soon as you can, start keeping track of everything you spend, whether it's groceries, gas money, travel, whatever it is that you're using your student loans to pay for, in addition to tuition and books, and continue to look at it every week, every month, check back in with yourself and see where you can cut back. College is the best time to be cheap, because everyone expects you to be cheap in college. And then one word of wisdom: avoid private student loans if at all possible. There are times where you don't have a choice. Again, with the FAFSA application, if something significant has changed in your parents' financial situation, occasionally you may not get as many federal loans or grants as you expected or needed. If you do end up taking out private student loans, it's important to make sure that whoever's taking out those loans understands the terms and conditions. Read the fine print. Certainly make sure that your credit score is as high as possible before you apply for a private student loan, because you can't control the interest rate on those like we can with federal loans. Always tap out all federal resources first. And even before going to private student loans, I would consider taking classes at a community college or getting a job. Private student loans are an absolute worst case, like final option scenario. I've had clients in the past who didn't understand student loans and how they worked and had gotten convinced to take out private student loans, and they ended up out of school with this one in particular I'm thinking of. She had $90,000 in private student loans at like 11% interest rate. I mean, depending on where you live in the country, that is a mortgage. That could be, you could have bought a home for that amount of money and with a much lower interest rate. So private student loans are confusing. It's not something that you want to just sign on the line without really understanding or having an advisor work with you. So avoiding private student loans, if at all possible, is really, really important. So what happens after college? After you've already filled out the FAFSA, you've already got your job, hopefully so. You've already got your loans. Now it's a matter of figuring out what to actually do. And I get it. This stage is hard. It's hard for everyone. When you first graduate from college, it's a whole new world. Suddenly you've got a full-time job. It's exciting to get a paycheck, but it's hard to manage all these expenses. And that's why I've stressed so much for the parents and the students who are yet to graduate from college that you really want to be educating yourself on this process ahead of time. But if you didn't have that luxury, you're not alone. Most people are in that situation. And once you graduate college, all you can do at this point is accept where you're at and come up with a plan. There's no reason to stress. There's no reason to beat yourself up. In fact, if I had, $1 for every time someone said to me, "My financial situation is the worst financial situation you've ever seen. I'm so embarrassed. It's terrible," I would be very rich, because everybody thinks their financial situation is the worst possible situation. But everything can be controlled. Everything, really. I mean, we have so many opportunities, and there's no reason to allow the stress to overwhelm you. What you have to do is, take the emotion out of it and come up with a plan so that you feel in control. It's so important. So after college, when you're looking at jobs, first and foremost, always remember to negotiate your job offer. Even a little tiny bit can go a long way towards helping you. And I'm not saying to negotiate just to be greedy, but really understand that when you're taking a new job, there's not one price tag. I mean, there is, like if you're a teacher or something where the salaries are public information and there truly is one pay rate, so you can't negotiate that. But if you're taking a marketing job, or if you're taking a job in the business world or an engineering job, any of those sorts of jobs, usually there's a pay range. So if your entry-level salary, it's not $50,000. It might be $45,000 to $55,000. So someone working in that job might be making $45,000, someone might be making $52,000. What you really want to do is find out what that range is and try to push towards the top of the range. Because when you're first starting out, you might as well start out as high as possible. And then as you prove yourself, you'll earn more and more, and it'll grow exponentially. So it's very important to not be afraid to ask for just a little bit more money in your first job offer. And definitely, the benefit of negotiating is then that gives you more room in your budget to save for retirement. I want all people in their 20s to be maxing out a Roth IRA, to be getting your 401k match if it's available. Really, the more you can save when you're younger, the better off you'll be. And I know it's so hard to balance your student loan payments with also saving for retirement. But if you can live with a roommate, if you can keep that old car going for as long as possible, anything you can do to cut expenses when you're young and max out your retirement options, as well as keeping in control of your student loans. When you get to be in your 30s and you have a family and you own a home, you're going to be so glad that you did those things. It gives you freedom to make better choices when you're older. So sacrificing when you're younger, it's hard. No one's going to argue that it's not hard, but it really does pay off. If your student loan interest rates are under 8%, which if you have federal student loans, they are, many student loans, if not all, are going to be under 8%. What that means is investing for retirement is actually a better mathematical option because over time, historically, the stock market has increased at about 8%, up to 10%, depending on how you're calculating it, per year. So if that 8 to 10% number in your retirement accounts is higher than what your student loan interest rate is, you want to make sure you're not putting any extra cash in your budget towards student loans. Pay the minimums on those. Max out your retirement options, and then if you still have extra money left over, focus on an emergency fund, and if you still have extra money left over, you should probably take a vacation, or you can put extra money towards your student loans. Other things to consider is don't rush into grad school. Really, that's where I see the people who have mountains of student loan debt that are really struggling under the weight of student loans. So be very thoughtful about grad school. Work first. If you really want to go to grad school, you may even be able to find a job that will pay for that degree. Take your time. There is no rush when it comes to that, and grad school can be very, very expensive. Unless you have a clear career path and a clear understanding of what your salary will be after you finish grad school, then take your time. It's the same rules as I would say for the undergraduate students. Reach out to people who are in that career field. See if that's something you want to actually pursue before you pay the money to get an advanced degree. Other strategies when it comes to paying off your student loans, again, finaid.org is incredibly helpful. They break down every single payment structure. They've got calculators so you can figure out which option is best for you. IBR and pay-as-you-earn are perfectly fine options. If you're stressed out about student loans and you're not making your ends meet, use those. Those resources are there exactly for you, for a young college graduate who can't make all of their bills. So use those until you don't need them anymore and then change. But I'd rather you use those than go into default or miss a payment. So it's better to take a reduced payment plan than to ever miss a payment. Getting into default can really wreak havoc on your credit score, and it's a little bit hard to climb back out of. So, it's still possible if you get into default. It's no big deal. You just focus and you keep paying on it. But certainly consider the reduced payment plans. Public Service Loan Forgiveness is a great program. They're potentially making changes to it to make it even better. So by all means, look into that if you're a teacher or an emergency care physician, also physicians. But if you're working in emergency services, any sort of public health, public field sort of nonprofit domain, look into Public Service Loan Forgiveness. You can get your loans forgiven after 10 years of on-time payments. They might make it even only 8 years of on-time payments. And that counts even if your payments are pay-as-you-earn or IBR. So if you're using reduced payments, you can get the balance of your loans forgiven. Very important. The other thing to do is to keep track of your credit score and your credit report. That's super important when you have any kind of debt, so student loan debt included. Log into creditkarma.com and annualcreditreport.com to get your free credit score, free credit report. Those are the two places to go to get them. And stay on top of them, make sure that your credit score continues to grow and that you don't have any sort of missed payments that you didn't realize or any sort of errors in your credit report. And here's a really, really important last tip, which is that if you did take out private student loans or any student loans that you had your parents co-sign, this is important. Once your credit score gets pretty good, like 740 or 760 or higher, look into refinancing those loans. This is particularly important with private loans because if you have your parents on those loans, that puts them with liability for making those payments if you are no longer able to. And this has come up recently in the news. God forbid you pass away or if something else happens. You don't want your parents on the hook for those loans, and they won't be if their names are not attached to them. So definitely look into refinancing only in your name. And you might be able to, to get a lower interest rate as well if your credit score is high enough. So that's something to consider. If you have questions about it, you can ask me later. And also, if you've got a bunch of federal student loans, consolidating those and rolling them all into the federal direct loan consolidation can also be a really good way to just keep track of your payments and also to set yourself up for public service loan forgiveness, or potentially also to get your parents off the hook depending on the situation and what your specific loans are. So that is a lot of information, and it's a lot of different life stages that we're trying to cover. These are all the resources that I was mentioning. We've got the finaid.org checklist beginning junior year of high school for parents and high school students. The Choose the Right College for You college selection tool, which I mentioned, very helpful. Estimating the cost of college, the different colleges that you're interested in, all kinds of great calculators on the finaid.org. The student loan calculator on the New York Times website is awesome. So if you have student loans currently and you're a recent graduate, you can use their calculator to figure out how quickly you can pay off your loans or what the interest amount you'll be paying over time is. And then also if you're curious about income-based repayment and pay-as-you-earn information, which is something that you want to stay on top of because it's continually updating. It's a ever-evolving field with the status of student loans that we live in today. So ibrinfo.org, very trustworthy, good source to bookmark that in your browser and stay on top of the information they have there. So that is understanding student loans. I hope that was really helpful for all of you guys, and I think we've got a few questions here. I've been trying to read them as I was going, so we'll some of them quickly, and then if you have further questions, by all means, find us on Facebook, Royal Neighbors Foundation, or for me, it's just Lauren Lyons Cole, and send us an email. You can get in touch with us that way, and we'll be happy to follow up with more resources and more answers to your questions. So Sarah, I'll let you go ahead and moderate.
Great. Thank you so much, Lauren. That was very, very valuable information. I have a high school senior, so I learned a lot tonight. I'm going to scroll up. There were a couple of questions up here. One, is there any correlation between college type and income level? You talked about the different income levels.
This is such a good question. I am so glad that someone asked it because I was actually going to address this and I forgot. So thank you, whoever asked that. Excellent, excellent question. Now, interestingly, studies have shown that there is no correlation. This is huge information. It's very important to understand. So if you're looking at two schools and if one is significantly cheaper than the other one, even if the expensive school is a quote-unquote better school, it's a better name, what really matters is not that, but it's the effort that your child puts into their education. So, for instance, I went to a state school. It was not very expensive. I got lots of scholarships, and I worked very hard while I was in school, and I've had no trouble getting jobs. And I'm up against, I'm in New York City. I'm competing against people who went to Harvard, who went to Yale, who went to very, very good schools. And not that there's value in doing that, but if that's a stretch for your family financially, and if you're not getting the resources you need to afford those schools, do not think that that means anything for your long-term career or earning potential. Now, the flip side that I do want to mention, if your child is very gifted and bright and gets accepted into one of those very good schools or, is a great athlete or whatever, those schools often have deep pockets. So you can get a lot of support. If you're not a family that has a lot of resources, you don't rule those schools out. You should still apply for them. Hopefully that answers that question.
Definitely. I have one of our insurance agents had asked a question. How can he help his clients prep for tuition savings? Was his first question.
Right. So this is a great question. So I definitely think that saving for college is an important thing for parents to do, but the one thing we always say, all the financial planners will tell you, is that, and I'm sure the insurance agents are already saying this too, right, that you can take out loans for college, but you can't take out loans for retirement. So I don't want people saving for college until they have a really solid retirement savings plan, and the reality is that in our country, many people do not have that in place. So I think a lot of times we end up talking about saving for college where that's really not the right conversation. The right conversation is, how's your 401k looking? How are your Roth IRA accounts? But if it is a family who has the resources to be able to pay for college, you should absolutely take advantage of tax savings offered by the federal government, offered by your state government, potentially depending on which state you're living in. And 529 plans really are the gold standard. I think there's a website called savingforcollege.org, and it's all about 529 plans. They evaluate the plans for your state. They will tell you whether or not you get state income tax reduction for saving for college. Grandparents can do it as well. It's a really good option. Definitely, you should never just write a tuition check. You might as well take advantage of the tax savings from a 529 plan. But only if your retirement savings are on track. So do that first.
Great. And then, backing up that question, the same agent asks, what can he do to assist clients with qualifying for the maximum amount of college loans?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question as well. And so I would refer you to the finaid.org. I believe it's on the checklist, but they've got a great breakdown of what you can do to set up your financial accounts and, not to work around the system at all, but just to make sure that you're educated on the fact that certain assets that you own will be counted in those FAFSA calculations and certain ones will not. And so definitely if you're working with a client who has a lot of assets, this is something you can start sophomore year or junior year. But if your kid's a junior right now, you want to do this before the end of the year. So by December of junior year is when you want to start reconfiguring any assets and just being aware of, how your accounts are set up so that you do qualify for the maximum amount of loans. They outline it very well on their website, and they're really the experts on that. It's probably not something, I'd probably lose a lot of people if I start going into all the details of that, but I can send that exact link if you want it. So we'll make sure to connect that for anyone who needs it.
Great. And then one more, should federal student loans be applied for by the parent or guardian, or should the student apply in their own name?
So also, this is a great question. I'm of the opinion that if you're talking to your child about their career path, about their plan, about budgeting, if you're helping them to understand how student loans will factor into their budget later once they graduate from college, I do believe the student loans should be in the student's name. Students who have no guidance whatsoever can end up, definitely taking out more student loans than are reasonable, and it can be very confusing. But if you're helping guide your student through it, I would much rather you do it in their name, and then you can help them make those payments when you get to that place. But if you take it out in your own name, then the responsibility really falls to you. And I think this is a time of transition where it's good for kids to take ownership of their earning potential, of their careers, of their education. If mom and dad are paying all of the bills, there may be a little bit less urgency in, waking up for that 8 a.m. class. But if it's your own money and if you understand that you're going to be paying that back, I think that it's better for the kid's financial development. Of course, some parents would disagree, and there is this deep desire that I think a lot of parents have to take care of their children, even through college, and to make those payments. So it's a personal financial planning decision for sure. I think I'm not hearing the sound. I don't know. Are you muted, Sarah, or is it just me?
Sorry. That's all the time we've got. That was the last question we have time for. But I want to thank you so much for your time, and everyone for taking time out of their evening to listen and learn a little bit more. When we log off here, there will be a survey that pops up, and I encourage you all to complete that for us and give us some ideas for our next webinar. And again, if you are, like these types of webinars and want to help us bring these to others, we would appreciate any information, and look forward to seeing you probably in November for our next webinar. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Have a great evening. Thank you again, Lauren.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Hope you have a great evening, and email us any further questions. We're happy to keep answering them.
Definitely. Bye-bye.
Bye.